Ancient Egyptian civilization, a land of pharaohs. What and where is Egypt? Ancient Egypt is a river valley civilization. A civilization is a culture that has developed systems of government, religion, education, and specialization. Egypt, or the gift of the Nile, is located in northern Africa. The Nile River is the longest river in the world at 4,000 miles long. The Nile River begins in the snow-capped mountains of East Africa, flowing through Uganda, Ethiopia, Sudan, and finally Egypt, where it empties into the Mediterranean Sea and forms the Nile Delta. The Nile Delta is located in Lower Egypt and provides fertile soil for agriculture. In Upper Egypt, the land has stones, cliffs, and sand. Three Kingdoms of Egypt. Ancient Egyptian history is divided into three time periods known as the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms. At first, Egypt was separated into two kingdoms, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. King Menes of Upper Egypt led his armies to conquer and unite both Upper and Lower Egypt. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt marked the beginning of the Old Kingdom. Menes became the first pharaoh. White crown of Upper Egypt, red crown of Lower Egypt, double crown. Egyptian government. At the head of Egyptian government was the pharaoh. A pharaoh is like a king, and it means great place. Pharaohs were taught to be the children of gods, which meant they were the center of Egyptian civilization. Pharaohs were in charge of appointing other government officials to help give counsel and carry out his orders through the huge kingdom. The most important of Pharaoh's government officials were his advisors. The Pharaoh's advisors were almost always priests. The second most important government officials included the vizier, chief treasurer, and tax collector, and the army commander. The kingdom was divided up into sections called nomes. In each nome, the pharaoh appointed a governor or local leader. The vizier made sure that each governor carried out their duties. Taxes were paid in surplus goods and labor. New evidence suggests that slaves were not used to work on sacred monuments like the pyramids. The majority of Egyptian people were peasants who worked the land along the Nile. These people had no voice in their government. Egyptian religion. Why did the ancient Egyptians build pyramids? The Egyptians believed that if the pharaoh's body could be mummified after death, the pharaoh would live forever. The pyramids were designed to protect the buried pharaoh's body and his belongings. About 50 royal pyramids have survived. Ancient Egyptians were polytheists. Polytheist means the worship of multiple gods and goddesses. Ancient Egyptians had a god or goddess for almost everything. Pharaohs were considered god kings because they were believed to be the children of gods. A major part of Egyptian religion included rituals for the dead. The Egyptians believed that when they died, they would make a journey to another world where they would lead a new life. Tombs were built and filled with things a person might need in the afterlife, like food, drink, furniture, servants, toys, and even pets. Preserving the body was necessary for life in the next world, and this was done through a process called mummification. Egyptians paid vast amounts of money to have their bodies properly preserved. It took a long time to make a mummy, about 70 days. The body was washed and purified, organs were removed, only the heart remained. The body was filled with stuffing. The body was dried by covering it with a substance called natron, which is a type of salt. This substance absorbed all the moisture from the body. After 40 to 50 days, the stuffing was removed and replaced with linen or sawdust. The body was wrapped in strands of linen and covered in a sheet called a shroud. The body was placed in a stone coffin called a sarcophagus. Finally, the mummy is ready for its journey to the next world. Why did the ancient Egyptians build pyramids? The ancient Egyptians believed that if the pharaoh's body could be mummified after death, the pharaoh would live forever. The pyramids were designed to protect the buried pharaoh's body and his belongings. About 50 royal pyramids have survived. Egyptian education. The ancient Egyptians held education in high regard. Limited number of schools where the royalty, wealthy, and future priests and scribes attended. Ordinary people were educated at home. Girls were educated by their mothers to nurture and serve their families. Boys were taught their father's jobs. The Prince's School, the most respected of all of the schools, and gave the very best ancient Egyptian education. This is where the sons of the pharaoh, members of the royal family, nobles, and high officials were educated. The vizier controlled the prince's school and the education of the next pharaoh, nobles, and court officials. Scribe schools. Only boys could become scribes, and would begin their education between the ages of 8 through 10. Scribes are professional writers who kept records, copied letters, and government papers. Students would spend hours chanting passages to improve their reading, and then hours practicing their writing broken pottery. Scribes learned to write hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics were a system of writing made up of about 800 picture signs used to represent sounds and objects. Papyrus is a reed plant that grows along the Nile, used to make paper. Ancient Egyptian students studied the following subjects: reading and writing, history, arithmetic and geometry, astronomy, music, geography, science, and medicine. Any behavior problems were treated seriously, and punishments ranged from beatings to writing out lines and even being placed in the stocks. Egyptian specialization. If you had lived in ancient Egypt, you would have seen all types of specialized jobs. People in ancient civilizations were able to have specialized jobs because of the development of agriculture, and having surplus crops let them focus on other things. Types of jobs in ancient Egypt included the pharaoh, the great royal wife, members of the immediate royal family, vizier, noblemen, armed officers, court officials, priests and priestesses, doctors, scribes and teachers, artists, craftsmen, foot soldiers, fishermen and farmers, laborers, tomb builders. How do we know so much about Egypt? There are two main reasons why we know so much about ancient Egypt: hieroglyphics and the Rosetta Stone. The discovery of Pharaoh I can't say that name. The discovery of King Tut's tomb. How about that? That's the Rosetta Stone. Hieroglyphics and the Rosetta Stone. By 400 CE, hieroglyphic writing was no longer used in Egypt, and the meaning of the symbols was lost. In 1799 CE, a French soldier was digging in a Nile Delta town called Rosetta and found a large black stone with writing on it. This stone would become known as the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone had one passage written 3 times in hieroglyphs, Greek, and Demotic. By comparing the 3 languages, French scholar Jean-Francois Champollion solved the mystery of hieroglyphics by 1822. Pharaoh Tut, Common. That's King Tut as we know him, Pharaoh Tut. On November 4th, 1922, workmen uncovered the top step of a staircase which archaeologist Howard Carter followed to discover the tomb of Pharaoh Tut in almost perfect conditions. The contents of Tut's tomb gave the world a detailed look into a culture that had disappeared over 3,000 years ago.
If you go to the Cairo Museum and you look at the artifacts, go to the Golden Mask. The Golden Mask is something that I believe it will never be repeated. No artist in the world will be able to do this beauty. Look at the eyes and the face. It is a masterpiece of art, in my opinion. The second
Highlights. Ancient Egypt is a river valley civilization. Ancient Egypt history is divided into 3 time periods, known as the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms. Egyptian government is ruled by pharaohs. Ancient Egyptians had a polytheist polytheistic religion and created mummies to preserve bodies for life after death. Boys could go to school while girls were educated at home. Only boys could learn to be scribes. Specialized jobs were developed in ancient Egypt because the surplus of goods allowed the pursuit of other jobs besides farming. Hieroglyphics, the Rosetta Stone, and Tut's tomb improved our knowledge about ancient Egypt.